I asked you a question, soldier. Why are you here?
And I am answering you respectfully. I am waiting for my ride.
The rain blurred the cruiser's lights into red smears across the windshield. Officer Mark Hanley squinted through the downpour, eyes narrowing on the black SUV idling at a yellow light that had just turned red. The driver didn't move, hands fixed at 10 and 2. Still, too still. Hanley's lip curled. "Yeah, I see you," he muttered, flicking on the siren. The SUV eased to the curb, signal blinking like a heartbeat. He stepped out, boots splashing in the gutter water. The rain hit his uniform in cold, rhythmic slaps. He approached the driver's window with the same coiled posture he used for every type. The glass rolled down halfway. Inside sat a black man in his late 40s, close-cropped hair silvering at the temples, eyes calm but watchful. His uniform was pressed, his tone quiet. "Evening, officer." Hanley leaned closer, smirking. "License, registration, and maybe an explanation for why you're sitting here like you own the street." The man handed over his documents without flinching. The hand that moved, unsteady, deliberate, bore a thin scar across the knuckles. His ID read General Michael R. Lawson, U.S. Army. Hanley froze. The name hung between them like a loaded round. The general's gaze didn't waver. "You done assuming yet?" The words landed with surgical precision, not shouted, just carved clean. The rain filled the silence after. Hanley's hand twitched toward his belt. His mouth opened. No words, just the thin whistle of breath between clenched teeth. Behind him, a phone camera light flicked on from a nearby car window. "Sir," Lawson said, voice flat, unshaken, "you might want to think about your next move." The siren still wailed. No one moved. The light from the phone glared white across Hanley's face, just as the screen began to record. The rain thickened, swallowing the evening light until the street looked drowned in steel. Officer Mark Hanley's patrol car rolled past shuttered shops, neon signs flickering over puddles. His hands tightened on the wheel when he saw the black SUV stopped at the intersection. No movement. Engine running. Headlights cutting the mist, he muttered into the dash cam. Vehicle idle too long at red. Possible loitering. The light turned green. Still the SUV didn't move. Hanley flicked on his siren, his pulse jumping with the familiar rush, the blend of power and suspicion that kept his nights alive. The SUV's signal blinked, and it rolled to the curb with quiet precision. No sudden moves, no panic. That calm irritated him more than defiance ever did. He approached, flashlight slicing through rain. The beam hit the driver's window, revealing a man sitting perfectly upright. Hands visible, face unreadable. "Evening. Officer," the man said, voice low and steady. Hanley chewed the inside of his cheek. "License, registration. You aware how long you've been sitting there?" The man passed the documents through the crack in the window, waiting for the light to cycle. "Didn't want to rush the turn in the rain." "Didn't want to rush," Hanley repeated, scanning the ID. The name froze him for a fraction of a second. General Michael R. Lawson. He glanced back up. "General, huh?" Lawson didn't blink. "That's correct." Hanley smirked. "What's a general doing sitting alone in a black SUV in this neighborhood at night?" "Driving home," Lawson said simply. The radio on Hanley's shoulder hissed. "Unit 12 status?" "Routine check," Hanley replied. "Possible suspect vehicle." Lawson's jaw tightened. "Suspect?" Hanley leaned closer. "I call it like I see it." The rain hit harder. Water streamed down Hanley's hat brim, his flashlight trembling slightly as he studied Lawson's expression. Too calm, too controlled. "You served?" Hanley asked suddenly. "I still do," Lawson said. 30 years, Hanley scoffed. "So what, you expect me to salute?" Lawson didn't move. "No, I expect respect." The air between them thickened. Hanley's radio crackled again. "Backup was en route," Lawson noticed. "You calling more units for a traffic stop?" Hanley's grin was thin. "Procedure." Lawson looked past him, seeing the blue strobes cutting through the rain. A small crowd gathered on the sidewalk, phones raised. "Step out of the vehicle," Hanley said. Lawson's silence stretched long enough to make the order sound absurd. Then he unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out. Slow, deliberate, military straight. Even the rain seemed to pause. Hands where I can see them, Hanley barked. Lawson obeyed, eyes level. You're making a mistake, yeah? Hanley's voice sharpened. We'll see about that. The backup cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out uncertain. One looked from Hanley to Lawson, recognition dawning. Sir, is that? Handle it, Hanley snapped. But Lawson turned, meeting the younger officer's gaze. Lieutenant James, good to see you again. Hanley froze. You know him? The younger cop straightened, whispering, He's a general, sir. U.S. Army Command. Hanley's face drained of color. His voice cracked. That right? Lawson's eyes never left him. It's right. Hanley's hand hovered at his belt, unsure whether to stand down or double down. The cameras caught every twitch. Officer Hanley, Lawson said quietly, you've already lost control of this stop. Don't lose your dignity, too. The rain hissed between them like static. Hanley took a single step back, chest heaving, and from somewhere in the watching crowd, a voice shouted, Hey, he's recording it live. Hanley turned, too late. The phone camera caught his face, his hand, his trembling indecision. Lawson stood unmoving. Rain sliding off his cap, eyes fixed straight ahead. Salute him, one of the younger officers whispered. Hanley didn't move. Lawson did. A crisp, deliberate salute, cutting through the rain like a blade. The flash of cameras lit the scene white. Freeze frame. The footage hit the internet before dawn. By morning, it had been spliced, subtitled, and re-uploaded across every major platform. Officer harasses Black General. Respect in uniform. Power trip caught on tape. Each headline sharpened the same truth. Hanley had picked the wrong man to humiliate. General Lawson watched it unfold from his kitchen table. Coffee untouched, phone vibrating nonstop. The television showed looping clips of the stop, slowed down, analyzed, dissected. The rain, the salute, the silence, now weaponized into narrative. His wife Dana stood in the doorway. They're calling you a hero again, she said softly. He didn't look up. Heroes don't trend, her voice trembled. Then what do you call this? A country staring at its reflection, Lawson said. Across town, Hanley sat in his cruiser, engine running, phone buzzing with notifications of a different kind. Anonymous messages praising his bravery. Donations pouring into a GoFundMe started by strangers. Memes calling him a patriot under attack. The department had told him not to respond, but every post fed the fire inside him. At headquarters, Captain Ruiz slid the morning paper across his desk. You embarrassed this department, Hanley. Hanley's jaw flexed. I did my job. You profiled a general. He looked suspicious. Ruiz leaned forward. Suspicious of what? Existing? Hanley's mouth twitched, but he didn't answer. Outside, reporters clustered near the entrance. The department's PR officer rehearsed a line. We are reviewing all procedures and remain committed to equal treatment under the law. The words were airless, already forgotten by the time they hit the microphones. Lawson's attorney, Derek Cole, a Marine veteran turned civil rights lawyer, called that evening. They'll want to make this go away quietly. Apology, maybe settlement. You in the mood to disappear? No, Lawson said. Good, Cole replied. Then we fight. At that moment, Hanley was in a dim bar, staring at his reflection in the mirror behind the counter. A TV above him replayed the video again, the salute freezing his expression mid-anger. The bartender said, Rough week, huh? Hanley didn't answer. He watched himself on screen and the look in his own eyes. The pause before he'd reacted. He could feel the crowd's judgment even now. The news anchor's voice carried through the room. Sources confirm the officer involved has been placed on temporary administrative leave pending investigation. The room went quiet. Hanley turned off his phone. They're not hanging me for doing my job, he muttered. The bartender raised an eyebrow. That what you call it? Hanley's glare was sharp enough to cut the air. You don't know what it's like out there. Outside, a drizzle began again, faint and cold. Across town, Lawson finally stepped out onto his porch, the night pressing in heavy and silent. His phone buzzed once more, a text from Cole. Tomorrow press conference. Don't flinch. He looked out at the streetlight. Its glow warped by mist. Inside, the TV continued to play the clip. The rain. The lights, the salute, looping endlessly, an echo chamber of a nation's fault lines. Lawson whispered to no one, "This isn't justice yet," and somewhere, Hanley whispered the same word, but with a different meaning. The morning light cut through the blinds in stripes across Lawson's metals. Rows of color and metal, decades compressed into fragments of war and peace. He traced a finger along the edge of one ribbon, remembering not the ceremony but the smell of desert dust and burning wire. Leadership isn't about anger, his mentor had told him once. It's about silence that makes others listen. He'd lived by that creed, through deployments, through bureaucracy, through every moment someone looked past his rank to his skin. But now silence had turned into spectacle. At the Pentagon, old colleagues called him, voices polite but distant. "Rough week, General. Keep it classy. Let the lawyers handle it. Don't let the uniform get politicized," he hung up after each one. They didn't get it. They never did. Across the city, Hanley sat at his kitchen table, staring at the half-empty bottle beside a stack of unpaid bills. His old academy photo lay on the counter, 2 decades younger, sharper, standing beside his father, a retired cop whose idea of respect had always been one-sided. He heard his father's voice in his head. "Don't ever let them make you feel small." He whispered, "I didn't." But the mirror disagreed. The department had confiscated his badge and gun pending review. Without them, he felt like a ghost in his own uniform. His wife, Karen, stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You know, you could have just apologized." Hanley looked up, eyes bloodshot. "Apologize for what?" "Doing my job? For humiliating yourself." He stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "He wanted to make me look bad. He didn't have to. You did that fine on your own." The silence that followed wasn't marital. It was existential. Lawson met Derek Cole at a small cafe near the courthouse. Cole's voice carried the clipped rhythm of a man used to arguing for breath in rooms designed to ignore him. "Press wants your comment again," Cole said, sliding his phone across the table. "They're already framing it as a misunderstanding." "Of course they are," Lawson replied. "Makes everyone sleep better. You want to set the record straight?" Lawson stared out the window. A young man in fatigues passed by, early 20s, probably fresh out of training. The salute he gave was automatic, reverent. Lawson nodded back. The gesture still mattered to someone. He turned to Cole. "No speeches. Just the facts," Cole nodded. "Facts are the new fiction these days, but I'll take what I can get." That night, Hanley scrolled through forums where his name was weaponized. "Blue Lives Matter hero. Officer framed by woke mob. Stand with Hanley." Each post made his pulse steady, then race. Validation was an addictive drug, and every click deepened his delusion of righteousness. But in the comments, a few dissenting voices cut through. He didn't even know who he stopped. Racism with a badge isn't courage. He slammed the laptop shut. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text. "You embarrassed all of us. Keep your head down." He deleted it, but the initials echoed. Captain Ruiz, even the department wanted him invisible now. In his living room, Lawson replayed the body cam footage one last time. Frame by frame. The twitch in Hanley's hand. The split-second pause when the rank registered. The way silence fell heavier than the rain. He stopped the video. Closed his eyes. His reflection stared back from the darkened screen. Half uniform, half man. Dana entered quietly. "You're thinking too hard again." "I'm thinking about masks," he said. "Yours or his?" "Both." He looked down at his hands. The same hands that had written orders sending men into battle. The same hands that had been held up under flashing lights like a suspect's. "Uniforms protect us until they don't," Lawson said. "Then they just make the target easier to find." Dana stepped closer. "You're still who you were before that stop." He gave a faint smile. "That's the problem. I've always been that man. They just never saw him until he saluted." Outside, distant thunder rolled again, rain threatening the city once more. Hanley stood at his window, watching a patrol car drive by without slowing. For the first time, he wasn't part of it. He pressed his hand against the glass, feeling the hum of passing authority. He whispered to no one. They'll forget him. They always do. But deep down, he knew they wouldn't. The story had already become something larger than him, a symbol of the line he'd crossed. Across the city, Lawson sat beneath his medals watching the storm approach, the same thought echoing in both men's minds from opposite ends of justice. Uniforms are supposed to mean something, and in that moment, neither believed they still did. The press conference smelled of coffee, sweat and cheap denial. Cameras lined the podium, lights glaring off the police department's seal. Captain Ruiz stepped forward, flanked by two stone-faced officers in dress blues. Behind them, Hanley's name was never spoken, just the officer involved. Ruiz cleared his throat. The department remains committed to transparency. A full review is underway. We ask the public to withhold judgment until all facts are known. Reporters shouted over each other. Was race a factor? Has the officer been disciplined? Is General Lawson pressing charges? Ruiz kept repeating, no further comment, like a shield made of bureaucracy. At home, Lawson muted the television. Damage control, he said flatly. Dana folded her arms. That's all they ever do, control the damage, not prevent it. He nodded. They've been rehearsing that line since 1968. At the precinct, Hanley sat in an empty locker room, the hum of fluorescent lights pressing down. He wasn't allowed to wear the uniform during leave, but he still did. Out of defiance or denial, he couldn't tell. His phone buzzed. A message from his union rep, keep quiet. PR's building a narrative. You'll come out fine if you don't talk. He typed a reply. Fine means guilty in silence. Then deleted it. From the hallway, muffled laughter. Two younger officers watching the viral clip again. Hanley recognized the tone. That mix of disbelief and dark amusement that cops used when one of their own became the story. He slammed his locker shut. You think it's funny? The laughter stopped instantly. One of them mumbled, no, sir. Then stop acting like it. The words came out hollow. Authority meant nothing without the badge to back it. Across town, General Lawson and Derek Cole entered a small recording studio. A local journalist had requested a statement. Off-script, unscripted, unfiltered. Cole warned him. One wrong sentence and they'll twist it. Don't give them anger. Give them clarity. Lawson adjusted the mic. Clarity is all I have left. The interviewer hit record. General, what do you want the public to understand? Lawson leaned forward, voice low, precise. That respect shouldn't depend on a uniform. That I shouldn't have to be a general to survive a traffic stop. That this isn't about one officer's mistake. It's about a culture that protects that mistake before it protects its citizens. The room went silent. The interviewer whispered. That'll go viral, it did. Within hours, clips of his statement flooded social media. Respect without rank trended worldwide. His calm defiance cut through the noise. Hanley saw it too, the headline flashing on his television as he sat in the dark. General Lawson speaks. I shouldn't have to earn my humanity. The words hit him harder than any disciplinary notice. Days later, body cam footage leaked, not officially released but passed quietly to the press. It showed the full stop uncut, Hanley's tone, Lawson's restraint. The moment of silence after the salute. The department scrambled. Ruiz called emergency meetings. We're not confirming authenticity, he told the press. But by then, authenticity didn't matter. The internet had already decided. Protests formed outside the precinct gates. Not massive, but steady. Signs reading, one stop too many. Candles. Silence. Veterans in uniform standing beside civilians. Inside, Ruiz stormed into the Internal Affairs office. Who leaked it? No one answered. Hanley watched the protests on TV, jaw tightening. They're using him, he muttered. Karen, standing behind him, said, maybe they're just listening. He didn't respond. That evening, Lawson drove alone to the memorial park near the river. The air smelled of wet pine and cold stone. He sat by the bronze wall etched with names of fallen soldiers. Some he'd led, some he'd buried, he whispered. You gave your lives for a flag that still asks some of us to prove we belong under it. His reflection shimmered faintly in the metal. Behind him, voices approached. Two young soldiers, one white, one Latino, arguing softly. Man, did you see that video? He didn't even raise his voice. That's how real power works, the other said. Lawson turned, silent. They froze, recognizing him instantly. Sir, we didn't mean... He raised a hand. You said enough, they saluted. He nodded, then looked back at the wall. The sound of the river filled the space where anger could have lived. Later that night, Hanley stood outside his house, watching a local news van idle across the street. His name wasn't anonymous anymore. Leaks had reached the press. A reporter shouted, "Officer Hanley, do you regret your actions?" He didn't answer. "Do you believe your department's thrown you under the bus?" His jaw clenched. "Do you think General Lawson deserved the treatment he received?" That one landed like a bullet. Hanley turned slowly toward the cameras. The rain began again, thin, cold, relentless. He said nothing, just turned, walked back inside, and slammed the door. The cameras stayed. The light on the street never dimmed. At the same moment, Lawson's recorded words replayed on national television, calm, controlled, unyielding. "I shouldn't have to be a general to be treated like a man." Each replay widened the crack between justice and image. Damage control had failed. The story had grown teeth, and neither man could escape what it was about to bite. The hearing room was too small for the number of cameras crammed inside it. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing every face in sterile brightness. Rows of reporters, citizens, and veterans packed the back wall. At the front sat the panel, 3 department officials, a union representative, and the city attorney. Hanley sat to one side, uniform pressed but eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. Across from him, General Lawson in a dark suit, posture razor straight, calm as stone. Captain Ruiz opened the session. "We are convened to review the conduct of Officer Mark Hanley during the traffic stop involving General Michael Lawson. This proceeding is being recorded." The murmur in the room subsided. Hanley's union rep, a stocky man with a defensive smirk, stood first. "Let's remember that my client faced an unknown driver in poor weather acting suspiciously. He followed procedure. The escalation wasn't racial. It was situational." Cole rose before the man could sit. "Procedure? Is it standard procedure to call backup for a stationary vehicle obeying traffic laws?" The rep hesitated. "My client perceived..." "Perception," Cole cut in, "is the word racists use when they can't justify their fear." A gasp rippled through the audience. Ruiz banged the gavel. "Mr. Cole." Cole didn't stop. "You know what's really dangerous, Captain? A badge in the hands of a man who can't tell dignity from defiance." Hanley finally spoke. "You calling me a coward?" Cole turned his gaze on him. "I don't have to. The video did it for me." Hanley's jaw tightened, but his voice cracked. "You don't know what it's like out there. You think every stop is safe? You think I can tell who's dangerous by their smile?" Lawson's voice cut through, low and even. "You thought you could tell by my skin." The silence that followed was total. The city attorney adjusted her glasses. "General Lawson, you chose not to file a civil lawsuit." "Why?" "Because this isn't about me," Lawson said. "It's about the next man who doesn't have a title to shield him." A veteran in the back row stood quietly and saluted. Others followed, one by one, a wave of quiet respect that rippled through the room. Hanley looked away, jaw trembling. Outside, the hearing streamed live across the country. Comment sections filled with split reactions, some demanding Hanley's termination, others defending him as a scapegoat. But the visual image of Lawson, composed and precise, standing under harsh light while refusing to hate, that image began to outweigh noise. Inside, Ruiz leaned forward. "Officer Hanley, do you believe you treated General Lawson appropriately?" Hanley hesitated. "I believed I was following the law," Cole interjected. "The law isn't your excuse." "It's your responsibility." Hanley's hands gripped the edge of the table. "You don't understand what it's like being the one everyone hates." Lawson looked at him. "Now you do." The room's air shifted, a mix of pity, shame, and revelation. When the recess bell rang, the room broke into fragments. Journalists whispering, cameras clicking, tension bleeding out into the hallways. Lawson sat back, exhausted. Dana approached from the audience, her hand brushing his shoulder. "You shouldn't have to do this. I know." He rubbed his temple. "But someone has to." Cole joined them, flipping through his notes. "They'll try to soften the verdict. Maybe suspension, maybe reassignment," Lawson nodded. "And what happens after?" Cole met his eyes. "You'll go back to being the story they quote instead of the man they listen to." Lawson exhaled, gaze distant. "Then I'll make sure they can't forget the difference." Down the hall, Hanley sat alone on a bench, uniform collar unbuttoned, sweat darkening the fabric. A reporter approached, microphone extended. "Officer Hanley, any comment?" He stared at the floor. No. Do you feel remorse? He looked up, eyes sharp but hollow. Remorse isn't what they want. They want blood. The reporter hesitated. Then give them truth. Hanley stood towering over him. Truth doesn't matter when the mob's already decided who the villain is. He walked off, but his words rang false, even to himself. When the hearing resumed, Ruiz's tone was clipped. This panel finds that Officer Hanley exercised poor judgment, resulting in public embarrassment to this department and potential violation of bias training protocols. Effective immediately, he is suspended pending further review. Murmurs spread. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Hanley's face flushed red. You're throwing me away to save face. Ruiz replied, We're holding you accountable. Hanley turned toward Lawson, voice trembling. You think you won? You'll go back to your speeches. I'll go back to being hated. Nothing changes, Lawson stood slowly. Everything changes when people stop believing that hate is the only language left. The gavel struck once. Hearing adjourned. Outside, a storm was building again, heavy, gray, inevitable. Hanley walked alone through the parking lot, past rows of news vans and microphones. One reporter called after him, What will you do next, Officer Hanley? He didn't turn. I'll survive. That's what men like me do. Lawson emerged moments later to a crowd of veterans and civilians applauding softly. Not in celebration, but in respect. He paused at the top of the courthouse steps, eyes closing briefly as the first drops of rain began to fall. Inside him, exhaustion and relief coexisted, not victory, just gravity. Behind him, thunder rolled, the sound of a nation still deciding whether it had learned anything at all. The rain stopped, but the air stayed heavy, the kind that makes silence feel like pressure. Hanley sat in his truck outside the precinct, watching other officers walk past him without looking. No nods, no greetings. His locker had been cleared out that morning. A cardboard box waited on the passenger seat. His badge, a framed photo from graduation, and the citation plaque that once made him proud. He ran a thumb across the edge of his badge. All this metal ever did was hide the man behind it, he muttered. His phone buzzed. A message from his wife. I'm staying with my sister. Don't call. He stared at the words until the screen dimmed. The reflection looking back at him wasn't the officer he'd always imagined, just a man stripped of armor. Across the city, Lawson entered a veterans community center. The walls were plastered with recruitment posters yellowed by time. Dozens of young soldiers sat in folding chairs, eyes fixed on him. He began quietly. When I was your age, I thought rank made me bulletproof. Turns out it just made me easier to aim at. A few chuckled softly. He didn't smile. What happened to me isn't new, Lawson said. The camera just caught it this time. But the truth is, the uniform doesn't erase what this country still sees first. A young black corporal raised his hand. Sir, how do you stay calm? I'd have snapped. Lawson nodded. Discipline isn't silence. It's choosing when your voice does the most damage to injustice. He looked across the room, the faces of those who'd fight wars abroad but still face battles at home. Don't mistake composure for surrender. Applause filled the small hall. Meanwhile, Hanley spent his days scrolling news he shouldn't read. Every headline carved at him. Suspended officer faces public backlash. General's dignity overshadows police PR. He told himself it was lies, but each comment thread felt like a mirror showing him what the world now believed he was. His only message came from a younger officer. Private number. No name. Not all of us agree with what happened. Some of us are trying to change things from the inside. Hanley stared at it, unsure if it was pity or rebellion. Either way, it unsettled him. He replied, You'll see the truth one day. The response came seconds later. We already did. It's on camera. He threw the phone across the seat. It didn't break. At home, Lawson scrolled through messages from strangers. Thousands of veterans, civilians, even police officers writing to thank him for how he'd handled himself. Some were sincere. Others wanted him to become their spokesperson. Dana entered with folded arms. They want you to be the symbol again. I didn't ask to be, but they need you to be. He looked away. Every symbol gets forgotten when the next video drops. Then make them remember this one longer, she said quietly. He sighed, rubbing his temple. That's the curse of composure, Dana. People mistake it for peace. A week later, Hanley met with his union representative. The office smelled of burnt coffee and paperwork. "They're not firing you yet," the man said, flipping through folders. "But it's close. They'll make you take bias retraining, maybe desk duty if you're lucky." Hanley's laugh was short, bitter. "Desk duty? That's mercy now? It's a job. I was supposed to lead, protect, not hide behind a desk." The rep shrugged. "Then maybe you should have thought before pulling over a general." Hanley stood abruptly. "He's no saint." "No," the rep replied. "But he didn't need to be one to prove you wrong." Later that night, Lawson stood on his porch again, wind moving through the trees. The air smelled of rain and distant smoke from the city's industrial edge. He saw a car slow down in front of his house, then roll away. Paranoia whispered, was it press? Or something worse? Cole had warned him, "You'll get threats. Ignore them unless they get close." He'd gotten plenty. Anonymous emails, letters that called him things he hadn't heard since boot camp. He saved none of them, but the memory of each stayed sharp. Dana joined him at the door. "You should get some rest." He shook his head. "Rest is for after the war." She hesitated. "Which war?" He didn't answer. Across town, Hanley parked outside the bar where he used to meet fellow officers. The parking lot was half empty. Inside, conversation stopped when he entered. The bartender didn't look up. Hanley sat anyway. "Scotch." The bartender poured, silent. A man down the counter muttered, "You're that cop, right?" Hanley's jaw twitched. "Was." The man laughed under his breath. "Yeah, figures." Hanley turned his head slowly. "You got something to say?" "Only that you made us all look bad." Hanley's fist tightened around the glass and then loosened. He stood, threw money on the counter, and left without another word. Outside, the wind had picked up again. The thin line between defiance and collapse stretched, invisible but near breaking. That same night, Lawson wrote in his journal for the first time in years, "Power means nothing without restraint." He paused, pen hovering. But restraint means nothing if no one learns from it. He closed the book. Outside, thunder rolled far off, another storm forming. 2 men in 2 different houses, both sleepless, both wondering what uniform meant. One trying to rebuild the world's trust, the other watching his own world disappear. The line between them had never been thinner. Morning light fractured through blinds, cutting across the table where Lawson sat surrounded by stacks of correspondence. Letters, emails, formal invitations, each one a reminder that his private humiliation had become a national discussion. Cole leaned against the doorway. "You made front-page news again. They're calling it the salute heard across America." Lawson's pen stopped mid-signature. "Catchy title for a wound." Cole moved closer, voice low. "It's not just press anymore. The Senate committee's reaching out. They want you to testify about racial bias in policing." Lawson met his gaze. "You mean they want a headline?" Cole hesitated. "Maybe, but it's a chance to speak truth, from someone they can't dismiss." Lawson set the pen down. They always find a way to dismiss. Across town, Hanley's house felt like a bunker. Curtains drawn, TV off. His name had become its own punishment. News anchors dissecting him like a specimen. He watched an old video on his phone, the moment that started it all. His own voice clipped and sharp. "You people think respect is automatic." Then Lawson's calm reply, "I earned mine. Salute if you understand that." The silence that followed still tore through him. Hanley slammed the phone down. He paced. Every knock outside made him flinch. He'd received anonymous calls, threats, mockery from strangers. His old precinct number had blocked him. He whispered to himself, "They don't know the full story." But even he couldn't believe it anymore. Lawson walked into the Veterans Center later that day, crisp uniform pressed, medals gleaming against the navy fabric. Cameras lined the walls. A press conference, unwanted but unavoidable. A journalist called out, "General Lawson, do you forgive the officer?" He paused before answering. "Forgiveness isn't the headline. Accountability is," another reporter shouted. "Do you think this changes anything?" Lawson scanned the crowd and the flashes, the microphones, the impatience. Change doesn't start with cameras. It starts with who's watching when they're off. The murmurs quieted. He continued steady. "The uniform I wear was meant to protect all citizens equally. The moment it doesn't, it's no longer a uniform. It's a costume." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was charged. Electric. Hanley watched the broadcast from his couch. Every word landed like a blow. His own son, Michael, peeked around the corner. "Dad, are you really a bad cop?" Hanley's chest tightened. "No, son. I made a mistake," Michael frowned. "They said you hurt a hero." Hanley's voice cracked. "Sometimes the badge doesn't protect you from yourself." Michael hesitated. "Will you say sorry to him?" Hanley turned away. "Go to your room." After the boy left, Hanley's shoulders sagged. The question stayed louder than the silence. Lawson's testimony came next. The Senate chamber was colder than it looked on TV, sterile, rehearsed, almost performative. He took his seat, eyes fixed forward. The chairman adjusted his mic. "General Lawson, we appreciate your service." "Please share your account," Lawson began, voice even. "It wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a symptom. I saw fear where there should have been judgment, bias where there should have been law. And I stood at attention because that's what this country taught me to do, even when it disrespected me." Murmurs swept through the room. Cameras clicked. A senator asked, "Do you believe the officer was inherently racist or—" Lawson interrupted gently. "I believe the system taught him he could be." The senator blinked. "You're saying it's institutional?" "I'm saying," Lawson replied, "if a man in uniform forgets what the flag stands for, it's because the institution forgot to remind him." Hanley watched the testimony in silence. His wife stood behind him, coat on, keys in hand. "You should listen," she said. "I've heard enough." "No, you haven't." He turned to her, anger and exhaustion fused. "You think you know what it's like being called a monster?" She didn't flinch. "No, but maybe it's time you learn what it's like to face one." The door shut behind her. Hanley sat back down, eyes on the screen. Lawson's composure, his dignity, it burned him and broke him at once. That night, the internet exploded with one clip. The exchange about institutional failure. Memes, think pieces, op-eds. Lawson's words became a movement. At the Veterans Center, Cole read messages aloud. "Recruitment's up. Donations tripled. They're calling you the conscience of the uniform." Lawson shook his head. "They'll call me something else next week." Cole smiled faintly. "Maybe, but this week they're listening." Lawson didn't reply. His mind replayed the officer's trembling hands on the day of the stop, the fear disguised as dominance. Meanwhile, Hanley drafted an email. To Lawson. The cursor blinked over the blank space. He typed, deleted, retyped. "You didn't deserve what happened. I didn't deserve to wear the badge that day." He hovered over send, but closed the laptop instead. Outside, rain began again, light, rhythmic, endless. In two corners of the same city, both men stayed awake, one lifted higher than he ever wanted, the other sinking lower than he ever thought possible, and for the first time, both understood. Justice wasn't about balance. It was about reckoning. The morning broke quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before history turns another page. General Lawson stood before a mirror, buttoning his uniform jacket for what would be his final public appearance before retirement. The medals felt heavier than usual. Not from weight, but from meaning, each one a reminder of survival. Behind him, Dana adjusted his collar, eyes lingering on the reflection. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. He nodded. "If I don't speak now, someone else will, and they'll twist it." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just make sure it's not the last speech you give to this country." He offered a thin smile. "I don't intend for it to be, but I do intend for it to sting." Across town, Hanley sat in his parked car outside City Hall. The rain had returned, a fine mist blurring the windshield. In his lap lay a printed letter, his official termination notice. No pension, no reinstatement. The department's final statement cited conduct unbecoming and irreparable breach of public trust. He read it 3 times, then folded it neatly and slid it into the glove compartment beside his badge. A local news broadcast played on the radio. General Lawson will deliver a national address today at the Veterans Memorial Hall. Hanley turned up the volume, then the engine. The wipers swiped across glass like metronomes of regret. At the Memorial Hall, the air buzzed with expectation. Reporters filled every seat, cameras positioned like rifles pointed at a single target. The crowd was a mix: veterans, activists, officers in plain clothes, even a few politicians pretending to listen. Cole met Lawson backstage. They're calling this your truth speech, no pressure. Lawson smirked faintly. Pressure built this uniform. When he stepped onto the stage, applause surged, not for the man, but for what he represented. He raised a hand, and silence fell. I stand here not as a victim, Lawson began, but as a witness to the cracks in the foundation of justice we keep patching instead of rebuilding. He paced slowly. That day I was pulled over not for what I did, but for who I was. And yet, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight back, because I wanted the world to see the truth without my rage blurring the lens. The audience listened, some nodding, others uncomfortable. I've worn this country's uniform for 30 years. Fought wars overseas, but the war that breaks most soldiers doesn't happen there. He tapped his chest. It happens when you come home and realize you're still a suspect. He paused. To those in power, accountability isn't punishment. It's maintenance. If the law protects only those who look like you, then it's not law. It's leverage. Hanley watched from the back row, hood up, face hidden. The words cut deeper than he'd expected. He thought he'd come to justify his anger, and instead, he felt its futility hollow him out. Lawson's gaze swept across the audience, just long enough for Hanley to think it lingered on him. The man who stopped me that day, Lawson continued, wasn't my enemy. He was a mirror held up to a system that raised us both. He wore fear disguised as authority. I wore patience disguised as strength. Both of us paid for it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lawson took a breath. But here's the truth, I don't hate him. I pity what the system made of him. The words hit Hanley like a strike to the ribs. He rose quietly and walked out. Outside, rain fell harder now, soaking him within seconds. He leaned against a lamppost, staring up at the gray sky. For the first time in months, he didn't feel angry, just empty. A reporter exiting the hall recognized him. Officer Hanley. Officer, can we get a comment? Hanley froze, then turned, eyes hollow. Former officer. Do you have anything to say to General Lawson? He swallowed. His voice came out hoarse. Tell him. He shouldn't have had to teach me what respect looks like. He walked off before the microphone could return. Back inside, Lawson concluded his address. This country's greatness isn't proven by who it honors, he said softly. It's proven by who it finally decides to listen to. Applause erupted, thunderous, unending. Cameras flashed. But Lawson didn't smile. He looked tired, human. Free, maybe, but scarred. When it ended, he stepped off stage. Cole clapped his shoulder. You did it. You changed the narrative. Lawson shook his head. I just told the truth. Change comes after the applause stops. That night, social media exploded again. This time with a different tone. The story wasn't about rage or scandal anymore. It was about reckoning, clips of Lawson's line. I don't hate him. I pity what the system made of him. Flooded every feed. Hanley saw it too. He replayed it over and over until he finally closed his laptop and sat in silence. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Familiar, haunting. He whispered to himself, maybe it's not too late to be better. For once, it didn't sound like a lie. Days later, Lawson visited the Veterans Cemetery. The field was quiet, rows of flags fluttering like whispered prayers. He placed his cap under his arm and stood before a marble headstone of a fallen soldier he'd once commanded. You'd laugh if you saw what I've become, he murmured. A symbol. Dana approached, holding an umbrella over them both. Symbols fade. Legacies don't. Lawson's jaw tightened. Then let's make sure this one means something. They stood together, silent under the gray sky, two figures in the rain, bound not by vengeance but endurance. In another part of the city, Hanley began volunteering at a community safety program, unarmed patrols, de-escalation training. He didn't tell anyone who he was at first, just showed up, listened, and learned. When a young trainee asked, "Were you ever a cop?" Hanley hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly, "and I'm trying to remember what that's supposed to mean. 2 men, 2 uniforms, both stripped down to truth. One found redemption in accountability, the other in humility. Neither victory was clean, neither was supposed to be, but both at last were human." Winter crept in early that year. The city wore gray like a confession, its streets slick with ice and silence. General Lawson's retirement ceremony was private, Intentionally so. No cameras. No headlines. Just a few officers, veterans, and quiet respect. Cole stood beside him as the flag was folded. You could have had a stadium full of people, he said. Lawson shook his head. Public praise is easy. Private peace is harder. The master of ceremony handed him a plaque, brass, polished, impersonal. Lawson accepted it with a firm nod, then placed it face down on the table beside him. He scanned the crowd. Among the uniforms and solemn faces, one man stood near the back, head bowed. Hanley. For a moment, Lawson thought it was a trick of the light. But then Hanley raised his eyes and met his gaze. Tired, hollow, human. Lawson gave a single nod. Nothing more. Hanley returned it. That was enough. After the ceremony, Lawson walked out to the courtyard, where snow began to fall in lazy spirals. The sound of boots crunching behind him made him stop. Hanley approached slowly, hands in his coat pockets, no badge. No defense. Didn't think you'd show, Lawson said quietly. Hanley's voice was rough. Didn't think I was allowed to. Lawson studied him, not with anger, but with the kind of clarity that comes after too much pain. You don't need permission to face the truth, Hanley nodded. That day, I saw threat. You saw fear. I was wrong. And I've spent every day since trying to live with that. Lawson looked away, exhaling through the cold. You can't fix history. No, Hanley replied, but I can stop it from repeating. He hesitated, then extended a hand. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. The wind carried their silence. Finally, Lawson took the hand. His grip was firm but not forgiving, simply final. Then start by being better than your worst day. Hanley swallowed hard. That's all I've been trying to do. A week later, the Department of Justice released its report, Racial Bias in Policing, a Systemic Review. Lawson's testimony had been cited 36 times. The reforms proposed were sweeping: oversight boards, bias retraining, transparency mandates. For the first time in years, Lawson felt something close to satisfaction. Not victory, but validation. Cole called that evening. You're making history, General, Lawson replied. History doesn't change until behavior does. Still, Cole said, you gave them no excuse not to look. Lawson smiled faintly. Then maybe I did my job. Across the city, Hanley scrubbed graffiti off a community center wall with a handful of volunteers. The words were faded now, half erased. Pigs die slowly. A young man next to him asked, Why are you cleaning that? You a cop or something? Hanley paused. Used to be, the boy stared. And they let you help here? Hanley looked at the scrub brush in his hand. They didn't ask who I was. Just if I'd show up. The boy shrugged and went back to work. Hanley smiled faintly. Sometimes redemption wasn't granted. It was earned through repetition. That night, Lawson found himself on the porch again. Same place, same view, different weight. Dana joined him, blanket over her shoulders. Feels quieter these days, she said. He nodded. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm. She tilted her head. Does it feel worth it? He thought for a long moment. It feels necessary. The porch light flickered, catching the faint scars on his knuckles. Reminders of training, survival, restraint. I used to think strength meant endurance, he said softly. Now I think it means knowing when to stop fighting and start building. Dana leaned against him. Then keep building, Marcus. A few days later, a letter arrived at Lawson's door. Handwritten, no return address. General Lawson, you don't know me, but you changed the way I see the world. My father's an officer. He used to think respect came with the badge. Now he knows it comes from how you use it. I thought you should know you reached one more person. Michael Hanley Lawson read it twice, folded it, and placed it in his journal, between notes of testimony and personal reflections. He smiled faintly. Full circle, he murmured. Spring came. The city thawed. The Veterans Center was busier than ever. On the wall, a new framed photograph. Lawson shaking hands with a group of young cadets captioned, Honor Without Fear. Cole pointed at it one afternoon. Think the world's finally learning? Lawson replied. Learning's not the problem. Remembering is. Outside sunlight poured through the windows. For the first time in a long while, he didn't flinch at its brightness. That same evening, Hanley walked past a police memorial, rows of names etched in marble. He stopped at the end of the line where new space had been left for future inscriptions. He didn't know why he stopped. Maybe because for once he didn't feel part of the wall. He whispered, "Do better," and kept walking. Back at Lawson's home, Dana found him asleep in his chair, journal open on his lap. The last line he'd written before drifting off read, "Justice isn't a finish line. It's a daily choice to remember who we are when no one's watching." She closed the book gently and left him to rest. The world outside moved on, slower, maybe wiser, carrying the echoes of a salute that had outlived the moment and become a mirror for everyone who'd once looked away. The air was clear that morning, cold, sharp, unburdened. General Marcus Lawson stood before a high school auditorium packed with students, teachers, and veterans. The stage was simple, a podium, a folded flag, and a single spotlight cutting through dust and stillness. Behind him, a banner read, "Veterans Week, Lessons in Service." Dana sat in the front row, hands clasped. Cole lingered near the back, nodding as the murmurs faded. Lawson stepped forward. The audience stilled. "When I was your age," he began, "I thought honor was something you wore. A uniform, a medal, a title. But the truth is, honor is how you treat people when nobody's looking." The students listened, silent. He continued, voice steady but threaded with gravity. "Some of you will wear uniforms one day. Soldiers, officers, doctors, firefighters. Some of you already wear invisible ones. The kind that come with expectations and judgment. Don't let them tell you who deserves respect. Earn it by giving it." A teacher blinked away tears. A student in the front row, a young black boy, raised his hand. "Sir, did you ever forgive the man who disrespected you?" Lawson took a breath. "Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once. It's one you keep open. Some days I walk through it. Some days I stand at the threshold." The boy nodded slowly. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, almost forgiving. After the ceremony, Lawson exited through the side doors into the parking lot. The sound of approaching footsteps made him turn. Hanley stood there. No uniform, just a winter coat and the look of a man still carrying pieces of his past. "You came," Lawson said. Hanley nodded. "I've been volunteering with the youth program here. Thought I'd listen for once instead of talking." Lawson studied him. The bitterness was gone, replaced by something quieter, humility, maybe even peace. Hanley looked down. "My son wrote you that letter," Lawson smiled faintly. "Michael. He's a good kid." "He's the reason I'm still trying," Hanley admitted. "He told me you didn't hate me." "I didn't believe him at first. I didn't need to," Lawson said. "Hate is a leash. I cut mine." Hanley nodded, eyes wet. "Then I guess I'm trying to drop mine." They stood there, two men framed by falling snow, the silence between them no longer heavy, just honest. A group of students walked out, laughing, chattering. One of them recognized Lawson and stopped. "General, can we take a picture?" Lawson smiled. "Of course." Hanley stepped aside, hands in pockets, watching the group crowd around Lawson. When the photo was taken, Lawson gestured toward Hanley. "He's part of this story too." The students hesitated, confused. Lawson continued, voice firm. "Because growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in confrontation. Remember that?" The boy who had asked about forgiveness nodded. "Yes, sir." They took another picture, this time with both men in the frame. Later, after the students dispersed, Hanley turned to Lawson. "You didn't have to include me." Lawson replied, "I didn't include you. I acknowledged you." "There's a difference," Hanley smiled, faint but real. "Fair enough." He extended his hand again, not as apology this time, but as recognition. Lawson clasped it. The grip was steady, equal. For the first time, it felt right. That evening, Lawson drove to the Veterans Cemetery. He parked beside the same headstone he'd visited before. The clouds had cleared, revealing a horizon streaked in orange and violet. He removed his cap, set it under his arm, and saluted. This time, the gesture wasn't for the fallen. It was for the living. For every man and woman still fighting unseen wars at home. For those learning to rebuild, to listen, to change. The wind brushed his cheek like breath. Dana's voice echoed faintly behind him. "You're finally free of it, aren't you?" He didn't turn. "Not free," he said softly, just at peace with the weight. Across the city, Hanley sat at his kitchen table with Michael, helping him finish a school report. The topic in Heroes Who Changed America, Michael grinned. I wrote about General Lawson. Hanley paused, then smiled back. Good choice, Michael added. But I also wrote that sometimes heroes aren't perfect. They just decide to change. Hanley's throat tightened. That's the best kind. Weeks passed. News cycles moved on. The story faded from headlines, replaced by others. But in small corners, classrooms, police briefings, training seminars, Lawson's testimony still played on screens. Some rolled their eyes. Others listened. A few took notes. Change didn't roar. It whispered. But it kept whispering. On an early spring morning, a new plaque was placed outside the Veterans Center. Honor is not in the salute received, but in the respect given. General Marcus Lawson below it, a smaller inscription, dedicated to every soul brave enough to confront their reflection. Lawson walked past the plaque weeks later, unnoticed by the crowd gathering for a youth outreach event. Hanley was there, guiding new recruits through de-escalation training. Their eyes met briefly, a silent understanding passing between them. No words, no ceremony, just acknowledgement, the kind that lingers longer than applause. Lawson raised his hand, not in command, not in pride, but in recognition. Hanley returned it. 2 salutes. One for justice, one for redemption. The air was still. The world briefly felt balanced.